Her lips lingered on mine for 12 seconds longer than usual. I counted. Not because I was enjoying it but because something felt wrong. When Lorraine pulled away, her smile seemed perfect, too perfect, like a mask crafted for a performance. "Have a good day at work, honey," she said, straightening my tie with gentle fingers. "I made your favorite sandwich for lunch." I nodded, trying to ignore the alarm bells ringing in my head. 6 months ago this affection would have felt normal, welcomed even. But after 15 years of marriage I knew Lorraine. This sudden resurrection of tenderness wasn't natural. It was calculated. "Thanks," I managed, grabbing my briefcase. "Don't forget we have dinner with the Millers tonight." "How could I forget?" She laughed, another carefully measured response. 7 o'clock. "I'll be ready." As I backed my car out of the driveway, I caught her watching from the window. When our eyes met, she waved enthusiastically. I waved back, the motion automatic, while my mind raced with questions. The changes had started 3 months ago. Small things at first. A hand reaching for mine while driving, genuine laughter at my mediocre jokes, unexpected kisses when I returned from work. Like a winter garden suddenly blooming out of season, it was beautiful but unnatural. I should have been thrilled. My wife, who had grown distant over the years, was suddenly present again. But instead of joy, I felt dread pooling in my stomach like ice water. Last week, I found a receipt from the Westlake Hotel while emptying the pockets of her coat before dry cleaning. When confronted, Lorraine didn't flinch. "It was a lunch meeting with a potential client," she explained, her expression neutral. "I told you about it, remember? The marketing executive from Chicago?" I didn't remember, but I nodded anyway. The seed of doubt had already taken root. Then there was the strange contact in her phone. Consultant with no company name attached. When I glanced at it while she was showing me photos from her sister's birthday, she quickly swiped away, her thumb moving with practiced precision. "Just some boring work stuff," she said, her voice steady but her eyes avoiding mine. I told myself I was being paranoid. Marriages go through phases. Perhaps she had simply remembered why she fell in love with me. Perhaps couples therapy, which we'd abandoned after 3 sessions last year, had somehow retroactively worked its magic. But tonight, as we sat across from each other at our kitchen table, reality finally crystallized. Lorraine placed her smartphone face up beside her plate as she served the pasta she'd prepared, my favorite, with the handmade sauce that took hours to simmer. Between bites, her phone screen illuminated with a message. I couldn't help but read the preview. "Can't wait for tomorrow." Our eyes met across the table, and in that moment something shifted. The carefully constructed facade slipped, revealing not the warmth of rekindled love, but the cold calculation beneath. Her shoulders relaxed slightly, as if relieved from carrying a heavy burden. "I need to tell you something, Walter," she said, setting down her fork with deliberate care. The room seemed to compress around me. The background noise of our home, the hum of the refrigerator, the ticking wall clock, faded away. All I could hear was the steady drumbeat of my heart. "I've been seeing someone." Her voice was calm, almost gentle. "I'm leaving you." My body turned to stone. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. The pasta in my mouth tasted like ash. "His name is Michael." Michael. My business partner. The man I'd brought into my company 3 years ago. The man who had access to everything. "I've packed a bag," she continued, nodding toward the hallway. "I didn't want to do this, but you saw the message, and honestly, I'm tired of pretending." The suitcase stood in the hallway, black, expensive, and fully packed. How had I not noticed it when I came home? As I sat frozen at our kitchen table, I realized the true nature of her recent affection. It wasn't love being rekindled. It was guilt being managed. And now, as the curtain fell on her performance, I saw only cold relief in her eyes. 6 months. Lorraine's voice sliced through the silence that had engulfed our kitchen. "Michael and I have been seeing each other for 6 months. 6 months. Half a year of lies, of calculated affection, of me believing things were improving between us." The pasta on my plate had gone cold, much like the sensation spreading through my chest. "You know Michael from the company events?" she continued, her tone matter-of-fact, as if discussing the weather rather than destroying our marriage. "He's been very interested in your business model for some time." My business model. Not our life together, not our history, but my business. The implications hit me with physical force. "Michael is your chief financial officer," she said, confirming my worst fears. Her eyes held no remorse, only a detached pragmatism I'd never witnessed before. "He believes your approach to client acquisition is outdated." I found my voice, though it sounded distant and hollow. "So this isn't just about us. It's about my company." Lorraine tilted her head slightly, the gesture almost bird-like in its clinical curiosity. It was never just about us, Walter. You've always been too trusting, too willing to see the good in people. In business and in marriage. She reached into her handbag, the one I'd given her for our anniversary last year, and pulled out a manila envelope. Divorce papers, she explained, sliding them across the table. Already signed by me. My lawyer says we can expedite things if you don't contest. I stared at the envelope without touching it. Inside that simple paper container lay the legal dissolution of 15 years of my life. Michael has helped me understand what I really want, she continued. He showed me how to get it. And what do you want, Lorraine? I finally asked, my voice steadier than I felt. More. The simplicity of her answer cut deeper than any lengthy explanation could have. Just more than this. More than you. She stood up, smoothing her skirt with practiced precision. I'm not going to apologize, Walter. That would imply regret, and I don't regret finding happiness. As she walked toward the hallway to retrieve her suitcase, she paused. You were always too trusting, Walter. It made you an easy target. The front door closed with a quiet click, not the dramatic slam I might have expected. Somehow that controlled departure hurt more. Even in this moment, she wouldn't give me the satisfaction of seeing raw emotion. I sat motionless at our dining table for what felt like hours, the envelope untouched. Eventually, I reached for my phone to call someone, anyone, but stopped when I saw 3 urgent emails from work. The first was from our biggest client, Evergreen Solutions, formally terminating their contract. The second was from our legal department, alerting me to unusual account activity. The third was from our HR director, reporting that 4 key employees had submitted their resignations simultaneously. My fingers trembled as I opened my laptop. I logged into our company database to find client files corrupted or missing entirely. The project management software showed dozens of our most valuable clients suddenly listed as inactive. I called Marcus, our senior account manager. I've been trying to reach you, he said, his voice strained. Walter, most of our top-tier clients have received offers from a new firm this afternoon. They're called Pinnacle Partners. They're undercutting our rates by 20% and promising the same level of service. Pinnacle Partners? I repeated, the name unfamiliar. Yeah, brand new company. Just registered 3 weeks ago. Marcus paused. Walter, Michael is listed as their CEO. The full scope of the betrayal crystallized in my mind. This wasn't just an affair. This wasn't just the end of my marriage. This was a calculated corporate takeover, executed with precision by the 2 people I had trusted most in the world. I scrolled through more emails, finding notification after notification of client withdrawals, financial irregularities, and inexplicable data transfers that had occurred over the past few months. My company, the business I had built from nothing over a decade, was being systematically gutted. And my wife hadn't just left me for my business partner. She had actively participated in destroying everything I had built. I returned to the dining table and finally opened the divorce papers. The terms were brutally one-sided. In my current emotional state, I might have signed them just to end the pain. But now, understanding the larger game being played, I set them aside. This wasn't just heartbreak. This was war. And for the first time in my life, I felt a cold, calculating rage begin to replace the shock and pain. If they wanted to play this game, they would learn that even the most trusting man has his breaking point. And I had just found mine. Sleep eluded me that night. I sat in my home office surrounded by financial statements and client contracts, piecing together the extent of Michael's betrayal. The glow of my computer screen cast harsh shadows across the room as dawn approached, mirroring the dark thoughts forming in my mind. What I discovered was worse than I'd initially feared. Michael hadn't just stolen clients, he'd systematically altered financial records over the past year. Falsified invoices, manipulated projections, unauthorized transfers to phantom accounts. The digital fingerprints were subtle but unmistakable once I knew to look for them. According to the doctored records, my company owed nearly $2 million to various creditors, debts I knew nothing about. If these obligations weren't satisfied within 30 days, I would lose not only my business but potentially my home, which I'd foolishly listed as collateral for a business expansion loan last year. I poured myself another whiskey, my 4th of the night, but didn't drink it. The numbness I sought earlier had been replaced by something else. Something cold and focused that I needed to preserve. The emptiness inside me was filling with purpose. Not healing, something harder, sharper. I picked up my phone and scrolled to a contact I hadn't called in years, Nick Harmon. We'd been roommates at university before life pulled us in different directions. Now he worked as a private investigator specializing in corporate fraud. It was 5:30 in the morning when I called. He answered on the second ring. "Someone better be dying," Nick growled, his voice rough with sleep. "Something is," I replied. "My marriage and my company." A pause, then, "Walter? Jesus, it's been years. I need your help, Nick. I've been compromised. Professionally and personally." By 6:30, I'd briefed Nick on the situation. His initial sleepiness had given way to professional interest. "This is methodical," he said. "Too organized for a spur-of-the-moment betrayal. Your CFO's been planning this for at least a year, maybe longer." "And my wife?" I asked, hating how my voice caught on the word. "She's either an opportunist or part of the original plan. I'll find out which." Nick's tone was businesslike, treating my personal devastation as just another case. I found it oddly comforting. "I want everything you can find on Michael," I said. "Business dealings, personal history, financial records, current activities. Everything. It'll cost you." "I don't care." After ending the call with Nick, I remembered something, or rather, someone. Maria Vega. She'd been Michael's executive assistant until he'd abruptly fired her a year ago, claiming incompetence. At the time, I'd deferred to his judgment, though I'd always found Maria to be exceptionally capable. I searched through my contacts and found her number. Would she even speak to me after how she'd been treated? I took a deep breath and dialed. "Mr. Thompson?" Her surprise was evident even through the sleepy confusion. "Is everything okay?" "No, Maria, it's not. I need to ask you some questions about Michael. It's important." There was a long pause before she responded, her voice now fully alert. "I've been waiting for this call for almost a year. We arranged to meet for coffee at 7:30. As I showered and dressed, my mind began organizing facts and possibilities, outlining strategies and contingencies. For the first time since Lorraine's revelation, I felt something other than pain. I opened my laptop again and created a new document titled Restoration. Not revenge, that seemed too emotional, too obvious. But restoration, yes. I would restore what was mine, and in doing so, dismantle everything they had built on their betrayal. I created a secure email account under a pseudonym and began monitoring Lorraine's social media. Her profile had already been scrubbed of our photos together. A new picture showed her at what appeared to be a restaurant opening, Michael's arm possessively around her waist. They were both smiling, champagne glasses raised in a toast. The timestamp showed it was posted 3 months ago, while she was still sharing my bed, still kissing me goodbye each morning. I saved the image, along with every other public photograph of them I could find. Know your enemy. As the sun rose over my neighborhood, casting long shadows across manicured lawns and quiet streets, I felt a strange energy building within me. Not the frantic desperation of a man trying to save what he'd lost, but the cool, calculated focus of someone preparing to rebuild from scorched earth. I tucked a small notebook into my jacket pocket and headed out to meet Maria. For the first time in years, perhaps the first time in my life, I felt truly awake. Every sense heightened, every thought crystalline in its clarity. This was not the end of my story. This was merely the beginning of a new chapter, one I would write in terms Lorraine and Michael never anticipated. I'd never been particularly good at acting, but now my life depended on a convincing performance. The man who stood before the bathroom mirror looked haggard, bloodshot eyes, unshaven face, slumped shoulders. Perfect. I didn't need to fake the visible signs of distress, they were genuine. What required acting was the narrative behind them. Broken man unable to cope with betrayal would be my public persona. Let Lorraine and Michael believe they destroyed me completely. Let them grow comfortable in their victory, careless in their confidence. The cafe where I met Maria was deliberately chosen, a small place across town where I'd never been, far from my usual haunts. She was already waiting when I arrived, a leather portfolio on the table before her. "Mr. Thompson." "Walter, please," I interrupted, offering my hand. She nodded, shaking it firmly. "I've been expecting something like this since Michael fired me. I just didn't know exactly what form it would take." "Why did he really fire you, Maria?" She smiled thinly. "Because I found irregularities in the accounting files. Nothing concrete, just patterns that didn't make sense. When I brought them to his attention, he became defensive. 2 days later, I was escorted out by security for performance issues." "You kept records." It wasn't a question. The portfolio on the table told me everything. "I did. I'm good at my job, Mr. Walter. Being thorough is second nature." She slid the portfolio across to me. Everything I noticed is in here, along with dates, specific account numbers, and copies of emails that struck me as unusual. I flipped through the meticulously organized documents, a surge of gratitude washing over me. This is comprehensive. It's also a year old, she cautioned. But it might give your investigator friend a starting point. By noon, I'd forwarded Maria's documents to Nick and received his first update. Michael Donovan was not the man I thought I knew. His credentials were largely fabricated, and he had a sealed juvenile record in Colorado. Nick was working on accessing it. I spent the afternoon crafting my public image of devastation. I called Marcus and a few other trusted employees, my voice deliberately shaky as I explained I needed some time off to process things. I canceled my membership at the golf club where Michael was also a member, citing personal reasons, with just enough emotional wobble to generate sympathetic murmurs and concerned looks. By evening, the word had spread through our social and professional circles. Walter Thompson was falling apart. 3 days later, Lorraine's lawyer contacted me to arrange a meeting about the divorce proceedings. I agreed immediately, projecting eager compliance. Before the meeting, I deliberately skipped shaving, wore a slightly rumpled suit, and made sure my hands trembled slightly when passing documents. My client is prepared to be generous in the settlement, her lawyer, a shark-eyed woman named Patricia Winters, stated, sliding a revised proposal across the table. I made a show of reading it, though I'd already anticipated its contents. Lorraine would waive claims to the house in exchange for a substantial cash settlement and my agreement not to contest the divorce. The document was carefully worded to seem generous while actually protecting their newly formed company from any future legal action. I just want this over with, I mumbled, rubbing my eyes wearily. I'll need a few days to review this with my attorney. Of course, Winters said, barely concealing her satisfaction at my apparent defeat. We understand this is difficult. As we concluded the meeting, Lorraine texted her lawyer. Patricia excused herself to take a call, leaving her phone on the table. While they were both distracted, I quickly used the device I'd brought for this purpose. A small gadget Nick had provided that could clone phone data within seconds when in close proximity. A silent pulse confirmed it had worked. That evening, Nick and I pored over the extracted data. The most valuable find was Lorraine's calendar, which revealed Michael was meeting with potential investors next Wednesday. They needed significant capital to fully launch their new venture. Capital they were counting on securing at this meeting. I also discovered through my banking contacts that Michael had overextended himself financially. He'd leveraged personal assets to fund initial operations, confident that investor money would soon replace his temporary loans. The next day, I began shadowing their movements, learning their routines. Each evening, Michael arrived at what had once been my home at precisely 6:15. They left together each morning at 8:30, stopping for coffee at the same cafe where we used to go as a couple. As I watched them through my car window, laughing over their lattes, I felt nothing. Not pain, not anger. Just cold, clinical focus. The pieces were moving into place. My phone rang at 11:15 on a Tuesday night as I sat reviewing the information Nick had compiled on Michael. The number was unfamiliar. Hello. I answered cautiously. Is this Walter Thompson? A woman's voice, unfamiliar but somehow controlled despite an underlying tension. Who's asking? My name is Kate Donovan. She paused as if waiting for recognition. Michael's wife. My world tilted sideways. Michael's wife. Yes. His actual legal wife. The one he conveniently forgot to mention to your wife, and apparently to you. I sat down heavily on my couch, mind racing. I didn't know Michael was married. Few people do. He's quite skilled at compartmentalizing his life. Her bitter laugh held no humor. I think we should meet Walter. We have some common interests to discuss. We arranged to meet the following morning at a small diner outside the city. I arrived early, choosing a booth in the back with a clear view of the entrance. When she walked in, I understood immediately how Michael had managed to keep his marriage secret. Kate Donovan didn't match the aesthetic of our social circle. No designer clothes or carefully maintained appearance. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, her outfit practical rather than fashionable. Yet there was a sharp intelligence in her eyes that commanded attention. You look surprised, she said, sliding into the booth across from me. Let me guess, not what you expected from Michael's wife? I didn't know what to expect, I admitted. I didn't know you existed until last night. She nodded. That's by design. Michael prefers me invisible. Easier to pursue his opportunities. How did you find me? Michael may think he's clever with technology, but he forgets I designed security systems before we met. She pulled out her tablet. I've had access to his email accounts for years. At first, it was just to confirm my suspicions about his affairs. Recently, it's become more educational. She turned the tablet toward me. On screen was Michael's email account, not his business email that I knew, but a private one. He never formally divorced me, she explained. He simply stopped coming home about a year ago. Said he needed space, that the relationship had run its course. He still deposited money monthly, until 3 months ago. When he started getting serious with Lorraine, I murmured. Precisely. So I did some digging. Her fingers danced across the screen, pulling up folders of information. Your wife isn't the first woman he's used to gain access to a company, though she may be the most successful accomplice so far. Accomplice? You think she knew from the beginning? Kate shrugged. That's what we need to figure out. Either way, Michael has stolen more than your company and your wife. He's taken our savings as well, nearly $300,000 that disappeared from our joint accounts. I stared at her, processing this new information. Why come to me? Why not the authorities? Because the money transfers appear legitimate on paper. I'd authorized him to manage our investments years ago. Her expression hardened. And because I want more than my money back, Walter. I want him to lose everything the way he's made others lose everything. She slid a flash drive across the table. His complete email history, financial records, and personal correspondence for the past 5 years. It's amazing what people will discuss when they think their communications are secure. I held the small device, feeling its weight, both physical and metaphorical. What do you want in return? Partnership, she said simply. I have information but limited resources. You have resources but incomplete information. Together, we can ensure Michael gets exactly what he deserves. And Lorraine? I asked, my voice surprisingly steady. That depends on what we discover, Kate replied. If she's a victim like us, maybe she deserves a warning. If she's a willing participant. She left the sentence unfinished, but her meaning was clear. Later that afternoon, as I reviewed the contents of Kate's flash drive, I discovered something that made my blood run cold. Michael had significant gambling debts, not to casinos, but to private individuals with reputations for collecting by any means necessary. When I called Kate to discuss this finding, she mentioned another name, Alex Mercer. Alex was Michael's first business partner, she explained. Michael orchestrated a situation that left Alex taking the fall for some questionable financial maneuvers. He served 14 months in a minimum security prison. And you know how to contact him? Better than that, Kate replied. He's been waiting for a chance at redemption. A chance to clear his name. By evening, our alliance had grown to include 3 people united by one man's betrayal. As I looked at the expanding web of Michael's deceptions, I began to feel something unexpected stirring beneath my calculated planning. A strange, inappropriate warmth when Kate's messages appeared on my phone. I pushed the feeling aside. This was business, the business of restoration. Nothing more. But as our planning stretched into the night, I caught myself noticing the intelligence behind her strategies, the subtle humor in her observations. For the first time since Lorraine's betrayal, I found myself genuinely smiling. This was a dangerous complication I hadn't anticipated. You're sure these documents are untraceable? I asked Nick, reviewing the dossier he'd compiled on Michael's past. Completely. They'll look like they were anonymously leaked from a former employer. Nick slid the manila envelope across my kitchen table. His juvenile record makes for particularly interesting reading. Identity theft at 17 isn't something investors typically admire. 2 days had passed since my meeting with Kate. In that time, our improvised team had assembled a devastating profile of Michael Donovan, a man whose entire professional life was built on fabrications, manipulations, and fraud. The key is timing, Alex Mercer said, joining us at the table. Meeting him had been surreal. A tall, austere man with prematurely gray hair who spoke with the precise diction of the financial analyst he'd once been. Prison had left him with an unnerving stillness and unwavering focus. Michael's meeting with the Westbrook Investment Group tomorrow at 2, Alex continued. These investors represent his only realistic chance of securing the capital he needs. Without their backing, Pinnacle Partners collapses before it truly begins. I nodded, sealing the envelope. And the delivery service will ensure this reaches each board member personally, just hours before the meeting. Kate typed rapidly on her laptop, her expression intensely focused. I've compiled the financial evidence showing his pattern of embezzlement. It's dense material, but I've highlighted the key discrepancies that even non-financial people can understand. What about witnesses? I asked, turning to Nick. 3 former employees from different companies have provided sworn statements about Michael's business practices. They've agreed to speak with the Securities and Exchange Commission if necessary. Nick smiled grimly. Amazing how helpful people can be when you tell them they might recover stolen funds. The plan was multi-layered, designed to attack from several angles simultaneously. While the anonymous dossiers would sow doubt among potential investors, I had arranged direct meetings with several former clients who had been lured to Pinnacle Partners. That afternoon, I met with James Harrington, CEO of Harrington Medical Supplies and formerly my company's second-largest client. "Walter, good to see you," James said, shaking my hand firmly. "I was surprised by your call." I maintained my composure, smiling warmly as if this were any normal business meeting. "I appreciate you making time, James. I think there are some things you should know about your new service provider." I slid a folder across his desk, watching as he opened it with casual curiosity that quickly transformed into focused concern. "These financial projections," he began, "are fabricated," I finished for him. "The cost structure Michael promised isn't sustainable. These are the actual operating costs, based on industry standards and their current staffing." James flipped through the documents, his brow furrowing deeper with each page. "And these client testimonials? From companies that no longer exist," I confirmed. "Shell corporations created to provide references that can't be verified." By the time I left James's office an hour later, he had already instructed his legal team to review his contract with Pinnacle Partners for any exit clauses. Similar conversations occurred across the city as Kate met with 2 other clients, and Alex strategically ran into a major industry player at a coffee shop. But the most satisfying moment came from an unexpected quarter. Kate had arranged to have dinner at Le Blanc, an upscale restaurant where she knew Lorraine would be dining with friends. Their paths had never crossed before, so there was no risk of recognition. Kate called me immediately afterward, her voice vibrating with suppressed laughter. "You should have seen her face, Walter." I walked up to her table, introduced myself as Michael's wife, and simply handed her our marriage certificate and recent tax returns. I didn't accuse or argue, just said I thought she should know and walked away. I could picture the scene perfectly. Lorraine's carefully maintained composure cracking in front of her social circle, the whispers that would follow, the frantic calls to Michael that would surely ensue. "Then what happened?" I asked. "She followed me outside, demanded explanations. I simply told her to ask Michael about his gambling debts to Vincent Russo." Kate paused. That name meant something to her. She went completely pale. Vincent Russo, one of Michael's most dangerous creditors, according to Kate's information. A man known for collecting debts through increasingly unpleasant means. That evening, Nick confirmed that the Financial Oversight Committee had received an anonymous tip about irregularities at Pinnacle Partners, triggering a preliminary investigation. By midnight, our separate intelligence streams confirmed the day's victories. 2 major clients had already submitted termination notices to Pinnacle, the investor meeting had been postponed indefinitely, and Michael and Lorraine had been observed having a heated argument in their car outside their home. As I prepared for bed, my phone buzzed with a text from Kate. "Round 1 to us. Sleep well." For the first time since Lorraine's betrayal, I did exactly that. She left him. Nick's voice came through my phone speaker, his tone matter-of-fact. "My source confirms Lorraine stormed out of their apartment last night with a suitcase after that investor party turned into a disaster." I set down my coffee mug, processing this information. 1 week had passed since our coordinated strikes began. In that time, Michael's carefully constructed empire had begun to crumble, slowly at first, then with increasing momentum. "Where did she go?" I asked, surprised by my own detachment. The man I was a month ago would have felt something. Triumph, perhaps, or bitter satisfaction. Now I felt only tactical curiosity. "That's the interesting part," Nick replied. "She hasn't shown up at any hotels, friends' homes, or family members' residences that we've been monitoring." I thanked Nick and ended the call, turning my attention back to the quarterly projections I'd been reviewing. My company was stabilizing. With Maria's help, we'd identified and corrected the financial irregularities Michael had created. 3 of our major clients had already returned, unimpressed with Pinnacle Partners' increasingly chaotic service. The doorbell rang just after 7 that evening. Through the security camera, I saw a familiar figure standing on my porch, Lorraine, a large suitcase beside her, looking nothing like the confident woman who had walked out of our home a month ago. I took a deep breath, slipping my phone from my pocket. I opened the recording app before opening the door. Walter. Her voice broke on my name. Her makeup was smudged, her hair, usually perfectly styled, pulled back in a messy ponytail. Can I come in? Please? I stepped aside wordlessly, watching as she pulled her suitcase into what had once been our shared home. Thank you, she said, her shoulders sagging with what appeared to be relief. I didn't know where else to go. I maintained my silence, observing her performance. The vulnerable posture, the carefully cultivated appearance of distress, all designed to elicit sympathy. I made a terrible mistake, she continued, tears welling in her eyes. Michael isn't who I thought he was. He lied to me about everything. I gestured toward the living room. Would you like some water? Or something stronger? Water, please, she replied, sinking onto the couch. Positioning herself in the center, I noticed, leaving no choice but for me to sit beside her or take the less comfortable chair opposite. I brought 2 glasses of water, choosing the chair. What happened? The story poured out of her, how Michael had been exposed as a fraud at their investor party when financial authorities had appeared with questions about irregularities. How his other wife, she spat the word, had confronted them publicly. How Michael's entire business was collapsing amid investigations and client defections. I never knew about the illegal activities, she insisted, leaning forward earnestly. I believed in his business model, his vision. He told me your company was stagnating, that you were holding back its potential. I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. And now I see I was manipulated. A tear slid down her cheek. I never stopped loving you, Walter. I was confused, flattered by his attention. But these weeks apart have shown me what I truly want. She moved to the edge of the couch, closer to me. I want to come home. I want to help you rebuild. I have information about Pinnacle Partners, client lists, financial structures, everything. I can help you get it all back. That's generous, I said carefully. It's the least I can do. She reached for my hand, which I allowed her to take. I know I've hurt you terribly. I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you if you'll let me. I squeezed her hand gently, watching relief flood her features. You must be exhausted. The guest room is made up. We can talk more in the morning. Gratitude swept across her face. Thank you, Walter, for even letting me in the door. Most men wouldn't. After showing her to the guest room, I retreated to my study, locking the door behind me. I sent the recording to Kate, Nick, and Alex with a brief message. The second act begins. Later that night, unable to sleep with Lorraine under my roof, I found myself in the kitchen making tea. A sound from the hallway caught my attention, Lorraine's voice, hushed but distinct. He bought it completely, she was saying into her phone, looking at me like I hung the moon. Give it a week and I'll have access to everything. A pause as she listened to the response. Of course I'm sure. Walter's always been predictable. He wants to believe I came back because I love him. Her laugh was low and cruel. Once I get the banking information and control of his remaining assets, we'll be back on track. The investors will return when they see the new financial projections. Another pause. Don't worry about Kate. She's got nothing but a marriage certificate. I'm his wife in every way that matters now. Trust me, Michael. The plan is still viable. We just need to adapt. As she ended the call, I remained motionless in the kitchen shadows. The tea forgotten, I felt an odd sense of calm wash over me. Not disappointment or renewed betrayal, just the satisfaction of a hypothesis confirmed. The recording app on my phone captured every word. Morning arrived with the scent of coffee and cinnamon. I emerged from my bedroom to find Lorraine in the kitchen, wearing one of her old robes she'd left behind, making breakfast as if the last month had never happened. Good morning, she said, her smile radiating warmth. I hope you don't mind. I thought we could have breakfast together like we used to. Not at all. I returned her smile with practiced ease, accepting the coffee she offered. It's nice. The domesticity felt surreal, this carefully choreographed performance of reconciliation, both of us playing our assigned roles while knowing the truth. I wondered if we'd always been actors even before Michael, just reading from a different script. I've been thinking, I said, cutting into the French toast she'd prepared. You're right about rebuilding. I need to make some decisive moves to stabilize the company. Her eyes brightened with interest, too quickly, too eagerly. I'd love to help. Whatever you need. I'm considering selling, I said, watching her reaction carefully. A clean break might be best. There's a potential buyer, foreign investment group, very discreet. They've made an attractive offer. Selling? Alarm flashed across her features before she controlled it. But you've built that company from nothing. It's your legacy. I shrugged, projecting resignation. Legacy doesn't pay the bills. And after everything that's happened, I want Michael to understand he didn't destroy me. I'll walk away with millions, start fresh somewhere else. I paused, meeting her gaze. Maybe we both could. She reached across the table, taking my hand. If that's what you want, I support you. But before you decide, let me show you what I know about Pinnacle's operations. There might be a way to recover what you've lost without selling. I'd appreciate that, I said, squeezing her hand gently. But first, I need to settle some accounts. There's a meeting with my accountant this afternoon. Would you like to come along? He's reviewing my personal holdings separate from the company. The invitation was casual, but I saw the calculation behind her eyes. Access to my personal finances would be valuable intelligence. I'd love to, she said, her thumb caressing my knuckles in a gesture of affection that once would have meant something. After breakfast, I excused myself to make some calls, retreating to my home office. Kate answered on the second ring. She took the bait? Kate asked without preamble. Completely, I confirmed. She's already angling for financial information. I've mentioned a potential company sale to a foreign investor. Perfect. Alex is setting up the fake buyer credentials now. By the time she investigates, there will be a convincing digital trail. Kate paused. Are you okay with her being there? In your home? The concern in her voice was genuine, making something twist unexpectedly in my chest. I'm fine. It's actually educational. Watching her performance, knowing what lies beneath. Just be careful. She's desperate now, which makes her dangerous. After ending the call, I prepared the next phase. I created several documents on my laptop. Fake financial statements showing offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, investment portfolios worth millions, and preliminary sales agreements for my company. I left them in a folder on my desktop labeled Private Sale Docs, making sure my screen would be visible when Lorraine inevitably searched my office. When we left for the supposed accountant meeting that afternoon, I drove to a nondescript office building where Nick had set up a temporary space. A middle-aged man in an impeccable suit greeted us as Mr. Anderson, my fictional accountant. For the next hour, we reviewed fabricated financial statements that painted a picture of hidden wealth, assets Michael and Lorraine hadn't known about when they planned their takeover. Your offshore structure is secure, Nick said, maintaining his role perfectly. The buyers won't be able to trace the funds once they're transferred to the Cayman account. Lorraine asked several pointed questions about the structure, the timing, the amounts involved. Each inquiry revealing her true interest while she maintained an expression of supportive interest. Later that evening, while Lorraine took a shower, I checked the small camera I'd installed in my office. As expected, she had spent 20 minutes searching through my computer files, photographing documents with her phone, and examining my physical files. I sent the footage to Kate with a brief message, Phase 2 complete. That night, over dinner, Lorraine suggested we open a bottle of wine to celebrate new beginnings. As we sipped our drinks, she asked innocent-seeming questions about my meetings for the upcoming week and my banking arrangements. I provided carefully crafted answers, each containing enough truth to be verifiable but leading toward our fabricated narrative. Each piece of information was bait that would lead Michael to exactly where we wanted him. When Lorraine excused herself to make a call, undoubtedly to update Michael, I added a new document to my laptop, a draft agreement to meet with the fictional buyers in 3 days' time at the Westlake Hotel, where everything had begun. The circular symmetry seemed appropriate for what would come next. Are you absolutely certain about this? Kate asked, helping me adjust my tie as we stood in the hotel suite we'd booked for our operation. Once we start, there's no turning back. I've never been more certain of anything, I replied, meeting her concerned gaze in the mirror. 3 days had passed since I'd planted the information about the fictitious buyers. 3 days of watching Lorraine's increasingly transparent attempts to ingratiate herself back into my life and my business. The grand ballroom of the Westlake Hotel had been transformed for our reconciliation dinner. I told Lorraine it was a small gathering with close friends to celebrate our new beginning, but its true purpose was far different. Everyone is in position, Nick confirmed, entering the suite with Alex. Financial crimes investigators are waiting in the adjacent room. Our actor playing the foreign investor is ready with the doctored contracts. The guests have been briefed. I nodded, feeling a strange calm. And the audio-visual setup? Testing complete, Alex replied. All recordings will display perfectly on the main screen when activated. The suite's phone rang, the front desk confirming Lorraine had arrived in the lobby. I took a final deep breath, looking at my three allies, the unexpected family born of shared betrayal. Let's finish this. Downstairs, I greeted Lorraine with a warm smile and a kiss on the cheek. She looked stunning in a black evening dress, her hair and makeup flawless. The perfect picture of the devoted wife returning to her marriage after a regrettable mistake. You look beautiful, I said, meaning it despite everything. Ready to face our friends? She squeezed my hand, her expression showing just the right mixture of nervousness and hope. As long as we're together. The ballroom was elegantly arranged with round tables, soft lighting and tasteful floral centerpieces. About 30 people mingled with drinks, some genuine friends, others actors Nick had hired to fill specific roles. I guided Lorraine through the room, introducing her to people she knew and some she didn't, including our foreign investor, who spoke with a convincing Swiss accent about our upcoming business transaction. Throughout the evening, I watched Lorraine's practiced social grace as she navigated conversations, always maintaining physical contact with me, a hand on my arm, fingers interlaced with mine, the picture of reconciled love. At 8:30 dinner was served. At 9 I stood to offer a toast, clinking my glass gently to capture everyone's attention. Thank you all for coming tonight, I began, smiling at the assembled guests. This evening is about new beginnings and, perhaps more importantly, about truth. Lorraine beamed up at me from her seat, raising her glass in anticipation of romantic sentiments. In recent weeks I've learned a great deal about truth, how it can be obscured, manipulated, but never permanently hidden. I nodded to Alex, who pressed a button on his phone. The lights dimmed slightly as the large screen behind the head table illuminated. Lorraine's voice filled the room. He bought it completely. Looking at me like I hung the moon. Give it a week and I'll have access to everything. Her face froze in shock as the recording of her late-night phone conversation with Michael played for everyone to hear. The screen split to show security footage of her searching my office, photographing documents, followed by time-stamped recordings of her conversations with Michael over the past 3 days, detailing their plans to access my supposed offshore accounts. What is this? She demanded, rising from her seat, looking around wildly as her own voice continued exposing her deception. This, I said calmly, is the truth. Finally brought to light. The main doors opened and Michael strode in, his expression thunderous. Lorraine, what the hell is happening? You said this was... He stopped abruptly, seeing the screen, hearing their recorded conversations. Perfect timing, Michael, I said, gesturing to an empty chair. We were just getting to your part in all this. The screen changed to display financial records, email exchanges, and doctored documents, the comprehensive evidence of their fraud, compiled by Kate, verified by Nick, organized by Alex, and now presented to a room that included 3 federal financial crimes investigators. Lorraine bolted for the door, only to find her path blocked by hotel security. Michael lunged toward me, fury distorting his features, but was quickly restrained. Federal agents, announced a woman who had been posing as a caterer, producing her badge. Michael Donovan and Lorraine Thompson, you're under investigation for wire fraud, corporate espionage, and financial crimes. I suggest you both come with us quietly. As they were escorted from the room, Lorraine's eyes locked with mine one final time. The mask had completely fallen away, revealing naked hatred and something else, perhaps a grudging recognition that she had been outplayed at her own game. I returned to the remaining guests, real friends and colleagues who had witnessed everything. Some looked shocked, others satisfied, all processing what they had seen. Well, I said, raising my glass again, to truth. And to justice, which sometimes requires a bit of theatrical flair. Later, as the ballroom emptied and the evidence was secured by the authorities, Kate found me standing alone by the windows overlooking the city lights. It's done, she said simply, standing beside me. How does it feel? I considered her question, examining my emotions like specimens under glass. It feels like restoration. Not just of what was taken, but of who I am. For the first time in months, I smiled without calculation or pretense. 6 months after the dramatic events at the Westlake Hotel, I stood at the window of my renovated office, watching the city below come alive in the morning light. On my desk lay the morning newspaper with a small but significant headline, Former Executive Sentenced in Corporate Fraud Case. Michael had received 8 years for financial crimes and corporate espionage. Lorraine 4 years for her role as accomplice. The photographs accompanying the article showed them both in court, Michael defiant to the end, Lorraine seemingly diminished, her carefully maintained appearance showing signs of strain. I felt nothing looking at their faces. Not satisfaction, not anger, not even closure. They had simply become characters in a story that no longer defined my life. My company had not only recovered but thrived in the aftermath. We'd absorbed Pinnacle Partners' assets at a fraction of their value, reclaiming our former clients and adding new ones drawn by the publicity surrounding the case. The executive suite now bore little resemblance to its former self, redesigned, modernized, purged of memories both professional and personal. A knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. Kate entered, carrying 2 coffee cups and a folder tucked under her arm. The Thompson Donovan Fund Committee approved all 5 grant applications, she announced, setting 1 cup on my desk. That's 20 more families who'll receive assistance with legal fees this quarter. The irony wasn't lost on me. The foundation we'd established to help victims of financial fraud was partially funded by assets recovered from Michael's schemes. What had begun as an alliance of convenience had evolved into something neither of us had anticipated. Nick called, Kate continued, taking a seat across from me. He's officially accepted the position as head of corporate security. Said he's tired of following cheating spouses anyway. I smiled, remembering how Nick had found purpose in helping dismantle Michael's fraudulent empire. He'll be good at it. No one's better at thinking like a criminal. Speaking of criminals, Kate said, her expression growing serious. This came for you. She handed me an envelope bearing the insignia of the Federal Correctional Institution where Lorraine was serving her sentence. I stared at it, turning it over in my hands. This wasn't the first letter she'd sent, just the first I'd allowed to reach my desk. The others had been filed away, unopened. Are you going to read it? Kate asked, her voice carefully neutral. I'm not sure, I admitted. Does it matter what she has to say now? Kate considered this. Maybe not to her. But possibly to you. I slid my thumb under the flap, breaking the seal. Lorraine's handwriting was unchanged, the confident, precise script I'd once found so characteristic of her organized mind. The letter was brief, an apology that read more like a performance than a genuine expression of remorse. She wanted to meet, to explain herself, to seek forgiveness now that she'd found clarity in her incarceration. She wants to see me, I told Kate, folding the letter and returning it to its envelope. And will you go? I considered the question, surprised by how little emotional pull it generated. What do you think? Kate smiled, not the calculated expression I'd once associated with Lorraine, but something warmer, genuine. I think sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying someone else's life. It's building your own into something they can no longer touch. Her wisdom struck a chord. Looking at Kate, brilliant, honest Kate who had suffered her own betrayal at Michael's hands, I felt a rush of affection that had nothing to do with our shared past and everything to do with our unexpected future. I took the letter and deliberately dropped it into the shredder beside my desk. The machines were felt like the final closing of a door. I've been thinking, I said, reaching into my desk drawer, about new beginnings. The small velvet box I placed on the desk between us was not part of any revenge strategy, not calculated to achieve any outcome other than a chance at happiness. Walter, Kate whispered, her eyes widening as she realized what it was. We started as allies in revenge, I said softly. But somewhere along the way I found something I wasn't looking for. When she opened the box to reveal the diamond ring inside, I saw in her eyes the reflection of my own journey, from coldness to warmth, from calculation to feeling, from revenge to renewal. As we left the office hand in hand that evening, I glanced back at the shredded remains of Lorraine's letter in the waste bin. The truth was, I didn't need her apologies or explanations. I didn't need closure from people who had tried to destroy me. What I needed, what I'd found, was the strength to build something new from the ashes of betrayal. Not cold revenge but a warm beginning. And in the end that was the sweetest victory of all.